In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a BMI calculator app within Flutter. The user is going to be able to select their gender using this application. After that, they'll be able to input their height using a slider. The user is also going to be able to provide to us using stepper buttons their weight as well as height. And once all of the information has been collected, when they click on this floating action button, it's going to go ahead and calculate the BMI for them. Before I get started, I'd just like to quickly mention the links to all of the resources that I mentioned within this video, as well as the link to the source code can be found in the description below. So feel free to take a look at it if you're confused at any point. To get started, the first thing that we're going to be doing is adding a dependency to our project, which we're going to be using, which is the item count number button. So link to this will be down in the description below. Just copy this, come back, go to your pubspec.yaml file and add this under the dependency section. And after this, that's pretty much it. Once this is done, you can do command save, let Flutter pub gets do it magic. And once this is done, then you can start running the application. And once the application is running on my simulator, then I'll resume the video. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing now that my application is running on the simulator is come to my home page, which is just a empty stateful widget, which for now returns in its home page state class for its build function a scaffold. I'm going to go ahead and add the app bar property to the scaffold. And it's just going to have a title, which is going to be centered. It's going to be called BMI calculator. Once this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is actually adding a body attribute to my scaffold, like so, which is going to be a call to a function called build UI. Then I will define this function underneath of this class, and I am going to say that it's going to be called build UI, and I'm going to open it up. And then within build UI, what I'm going to be doing is returning a column. And the reason we're going to be returning a column is because if I take a look at the actual design of my application, we have widgets that are arranged in a vertical manner. And the way we do this is by using a column. So I will do a column and I'll define the children list for this. And for now, it's going to be empty. Once this is done, the next thing I'm also going to be doing is adding the floating action button to my actual scaffold. And this is going to be equal to floating action button, like so. And then on pressed for now is going to be an empty function. And do command save. And with this, we are going to be seeing an empty floating action button being displayed to us. Since I want an icon to be displayed, what I'm going to do is set the child property for this function to be an icon, which is going to be icons.calculate. Do command save. And now we have the icon being shown. So once this is done, before we proceed with creating any of the UI, what I'd like to do is actually define the variables which are going to help us store the relevant information for calculating our BMI. So I'm going to create an integer, and I'm going to say that this is going to be the selected gender. And I'm going to say that if our integer value is going to be 0, then it's going to be male. If it's going to be 1, then we'll refer to it as female. And by default, the value is going to be 0. Once this is done, I'm also going to set the height variable, and I'm going to say that this is by default going to be 170, since we actually store our height in centimeters. Once that is done, I'll set the age to be equal to 23. And then finally, I'll create a weight variable, and I'll set that to be 65. And with this done, I'll do command save. Then I will also create another, which is going to be a double variable. I'll call this underscore BMI, and I'll set that to 0 to start with and do command save. So now that we have variables defined, which we are going to be using to store information into, and then using these to actually calculate our BMI, we can proceed to creating our UI. To create my UI, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is actually creating the gender selection widget, which is the one here. So let's get into it. So to do this, firstly, what I'll do is I'll come to my column, and I'm going to say that the first child within this column is going to be a call to a function, which is going to be called gender selector. Once this is done, then what I'll do is that I'll define this function. So I will come down, I'll say that we're going to have a function which will return a widget called gender selector and open it up. Within this, I'm going to say that I'm going to return a container, like so. And then before I add anything to this container, I'll add a semicolon at the end. This container is going to have a child within this, which is going to be a row. And the reason we're using a row is because if you take a close look at our design, you're going to see that we have two buttons. One can help us select a male and a female, and they're arranged in a horizontal manner. This can be achieved by using a row. Once this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is actually coming into the row and defining the children's list for this and actually adding a child within this. Since my actual button to select a gender is going to have an actual icon and then a text widget underneath of it, I'm actually going to be creating a column. And then within this column, I'm going to add some children, like so, and then do command save. So within this column, the first thing that I'm going to be adding is actually an icon button. So for that, I'll do icon button, like so. And then on pressed, I'm going to leave that to be empty for now. And then the icon here is going to be a icon widget, like so. And then I'm going to say that it's going to be called icons.mail, like so. And then I will do command save, and hopefully our icon is being shown. So now I'll update some of the properties on the icon. The first is going to be to change its size and set that to be 60. So icon button icon size is 60. Once this is done, I'll come to the bottom of this column. So after my icon button, and I'm going to add a text widget here, which is going to say mail, like so. So now that this is done, what I want to do is actually set up the positioning for these actual buttons. So for that, I'm going to modify some properties of my row. I'm going to set the main axis size for my row to be max. I'm going to set the main axis alignment to be spaced evenly. And then I'm going to set the cross axis alignment to be center, like so, and do command save. And now that this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is actually determining what the color of this actual icon should be. So if we've selected male, then the color for this icon should be different. And if it's not selected, then it should be different. So to do this, what I'll do is that I'll come to my icon and I'm going to set the color property for this icon button's icon. And I'm going to say if the selected gender is 0, then we're going to have this color. And the color is going to be extracted from our theme. So I'm going to do theme.of context, then I'm going to say color scheme dot primary. And if this is not the case, if the selected gender is not 0, then I'm going to do colors dot black. So if I do this and do command save, you're going to see that now the color of our icon changes to blue because currently the selected gender is 0. So now that this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is actually setting up the on pressed button callback so that we actually set the gender to be whatever gender we select. So I'm going to call set state, and within set state, I'm going to say that the selected gender is going to be 0, like so, and do command save. So once this is done, that's pretty much all we had to do. So now what I'll do is that I am going to basically come to my column. I'm going to copy all of this code, and I'll also close down this debug console. And then what I'm going to be doing is that after this column, within the rows children list, I'll paste the same widget again, like so, and do command save. So now we have 2 buttons. But for this button, the second one, I want it to be for female. So I'll change the text to be female. And once that is done, I'll change the icon to be icon.female. And then I'll also change the logic to be if the selected gender is 1, then we show this, otherwise it's black. And then when we call set state, I want to set the selected gender to be 1. With this done, now we can switch between the genders, as you can see. So when we click on the male one, it highlights that. When we click on female, it highlights that. And we're appropriately storing this information in a variable. So the final thing that I want to do is add some styling to the container so that it looks pretty like this. So for this, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be coming at the top to my container. And within my container, I am going to be adding the decoration property, like so. And I'm going to say it's going to be box decoration. The color is going to be text.of context color scheme primary container, border radius 15, do that. And then I'm going to add some margin and padding. So to the container, I'm going to add some margin and padding, do command save, and there we have it. Now it's looking pretty fantastic. So now that we are able to select our gender, we can move on to the next step. So the next step is going to be our height input. So for that, what I'll do is that I am going to come back firstly to my actual build UI function. And then here I'm going to say that after we have our gender selector, I'm going to have my height input. Do command save. Then I will come back and I'm going to say that I'm going to have a widget, which is going to be returned by a function that is going to be called height input. And then I'll open this up. Within this function, what I'm going to do is actually return a container, which is going to be exactly the same as the container that we're returning for gender selector, because I want the styling to be same. So I'll copy all of this up till the child. I'll come down and I'll paste it here like so. And then I'm going to add the remaining bracket like so. And once this is done for the child here, what I'm going to be doing is saying that we're going to have a column. And then I'm going to set the children's property now to be empty and do command save. And that's pretty much it. So now we have our height input. So for the column, why are we using a column? Well, the reason for that is because for our height, we have 3 separate things that are being displayed within our container. We have our height, following that we have a slider, following that we have the actual input. So we have 3 different widgets that we want to align in a vertical manner. For that, we're using a column within our container. So once this is done within my column, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is adding a text widget with some certain styling applied to it and do command save so I can see that. And once this is done, the next thing that we're going to be doing is adding my slider. So to add my slider, I'm going to create a slider widget. And then the initial value for this slider is going to be our height. And then I'm going to say that it's going to be 2 double. And the reason we have to cast it to a double is because our slider expects the value to be a double. And then what happens when we change the slider? Well, in this case, we're going to get a value that's going to be passed to us. And I'm going to call setState, like so. And within setState, I'll stop running my application for now, since we have to define some additional parameters for our slider. Within setState, what I'll do is that I'll say that our height is going to be equal to the value and then dot to int. So I'll cast the double that we get to an integer and then save that within the actual height variable, add the remaining commas wherever they are necessary, and do command save. So now for our slider, it's not going to work as of now because we need to define some other properties for it. So let's do that. So firstly, what we're going to be doing is defining the minimum property. So the minimum value that we can select on our slider, which is going to be 0. The maximum, since we're actually going to be recording the height in centimeters, the maximum that I want the height to be selected is going to be 300. So 300 equates to 300 centimeters. And then how many divisions are we going to separate our actual min and max range into? So I want the increments to be in 1 centimeter increments. So I'm going to say that we're going to divide into 300 divisions. So 300 by 300, which means every division is going to be 1 centimeter or 1, and do command save. So once this is done, I'll start running my application, and hopefully this time we're not going to get any error. And while this is happening, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is actually after my slider, adding a text widget. And I'm going to say that in our text widget, we're going to be basically showcasing our height. So I'm going to interpolate the height by using a $sign. And then adding the height variable, and then adding a space and CM after that, and do command save. So by default, 170 is what the value was set to when we actually create our variable here, like so. So now, if I go ahead and change this, you can see that our slider is working as intended and the value is being updated. So the last thing that I'm going to be doing is actually applying some styling to the text, doing command save, and that's pretty much it. That's all we had to do. So now that this is done, the next thing that we have to do is create our actual widgets for selecting the weight and the age. And the weight and the age widgets are going to be in a row. So how are we going to be achieving this? Well, to achieve this, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is actually going to the very top where I have my build UI function. And in my build UI function, I'm going to basically call another function after height input, which is going to be a function which is going to be called weight and age input row, and do command save. Then I'll copy this function name, and it's going to be the same just as before. I'm going to come to the bottom of my class. I'll say that we'll return a widget using this function, which is going to be named _weight and age input row, and then open it up. And within this function, what I'm going to be basically doing is returning a row. So I'm going to say that we're going to return a row, and it's going to have some children, and do command save. Then the first child for this row is going to be a call to a function called weight input. So I'll add that and do command save. And then similarly, I'm going to create a function which is going to be called weight input, returns a widget, and open it up. Within this, I'm going to be adding the same container since the styling remains pretty much the same. So for this, what I'll do is that I'll come to the top of my height input. I'll copy all of this container stuff up to the point where we have this column widget. So copy this, paste it here, add the remaining brackets like so, do command save. Then I'm going to set the children's property for the column to be empty children's for now, and do command save. So let's see how our actual widget is going to look. So we have this weight text. Underneath of that, we have this button that allows us to increment or decrement our weight. So firstly, we're going to add a text with some certain styling applied to it that is going to say weight. So let's do that and do command save. And I'm also going to update the actual padding property here. So the padding now is going to be not only vertical but horizontal as well, 10.0, and do command save. Once this is done, the next thing that I'm going to be doing is actually adding the item count widget. And this is going to come from the package that we have added before. It's going to expect us to give it some places. Firstly, since I do not want my weight to be in decimals, I am going to set the decimal places to 0. OnChanged is going to be the same, just we're going to have a value that's going to be passed to us. And then I'm going to call setState within this. And within setState, what I'm going to be doing is actually saying that we will set our actual weight to be equal to the value that gets passed to us. And then I need to cast this to a integer and do command save. Then for the minimum value, the minimum weight that I want somebody to input is going to be 50. So you can't go under 50 kilos. And the maximum is going to be 350 kilos, which is a lot, but we'll kind of run with it. And then after this, I'm going to say that the initial value for this is going to be the weight, like so, and do command save. So once this is done, as you can see, the weight widget is now being shown to us, and I can increment and decrement the weight. So the final thing that I want to do is update the button's width and height. So I'm going to paste these properties in, do command save, and that's pretty much it. That's all we had to do. So now I'll do command save, and it's looking pretty stunning now, if I might say so myself. So now that this is done, what I am going to be doing is basically copying all of this function, and then I'm going to paste it in. And here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to firstly say that now it's going to be saying age. And once this actual item counts on change this called, this time we'll set the age to be whatever the value is, like so. And then I am also going to update the minimum and maximum value. So this time the minimum value is going to be 1 and the maximum is going to be 100. And then once this is done, I'm going to change the name for this function to be age input. Then as we had done before, I'll copy this age input. I'll come to the function where we actually define the row, which is here, weight and age input row. Add this after the weight input and do command save. And once this is done, the last thing that I'm going to be doing is actually adding some properties to my row to actually set up its positioning and everything. So do command save. So now our inputs are centered and they're also evenly spaced and everything looks fantastic. So now the last thing that I need to do is actually implement the actual result container, which is going to show us the result of our BMI calculation. So for this, what I'll do is that I am going to firstly come to the bottom, and here I'm going to say that I'm going to have a function which will return a widget called BMI result. And then within this, I'm going to have the same container with the same type of padding. So I'm going to copy all of this container stuff up to the point where the child is, then come down, paste it here. The child is going to be a container. And then I'm going to add the remaining columns like so, do command save. Then I'm going to take this BMI result. I'm going to go to the very top where I have my main column defined within build UI. And after the weight and age input row, I'm going to add the BMI result and do command save. And now finally, I will come down to my BMI result, and I am going to change the child here to be a text now widget. The text widget here is going to say BMI, and then after this, we are going to show our calculated BMI. So for that, I am going to do $, and then I'm going to add some curly brackets, and then I'm going to do BMI, and then dot, and do command save. And that's pretty much it. So now our BMI is being shown. So once this is done, I'm going to add some styling attributes to this. Command save, and there we go. Our UI is looking fantastic. So now that this is done, what I want to do is actually make sure that when we click on this button, it actually calculates the BMI for us. So to do that, what we are going to be doing is coming to our build function and then going to floating action button and on press property. And here I'm going to call set state. And then this is where all of the magic is going to happen. And I'm sorry to let you guys know that when we actually calculate the BMI, we are not going to be using either the gender or the age of that person. The only thing that we're going to be taking into consideration is the weight and height. But since I wanted the UI to look a bit pretty and showcase to you guys the different elements that you can use, that's why I decided to add these as well. But to actually calculate the BMI, all we're going to be doing is setting the BMI to be equal to, and this is the actual formula. We're going to take our weight and we're going to be dividing this by the height squared. So to square something, we're going to do the power function, where the first is the actual value that we want to square. So it's going to be height, and then what we want to square it to. So in this case, we want to square it, so we want to raise it to the power of 2, but power allows us to raise any value to whatever exponent we want, and then do command save. But if we do it like this, our actual BMI is going to be calculated incorrectly, because this function takes into consideration the weight being in kilos and then the height being in meters. So since we're actually calculating the height in centimeters, I am going to divide the height by 100, and then our BMI calculation is going to be correct, because the height divided by 100 is going to be the height in meters. So once this is done, we're going to do Command Save. And if I go ahead and click on my actual floating action button, you're going to see that the BMI is calculated for me. So the last thing that I want to do is actually update how the BMI is displayed and limit how many decimal values we are showing. So I'll come to the bottom where we are showing the BMI in the text, and I'm going to say that we are going to have a call where I'm going to do toString as fixed. So this is going to allow us to take our number and then convert that to a string up to a fixed amount of decimal points. And I'm going to say 2 to be the value, to Command Save. And now our BMI is only showing up to 2 decimal points. I think 1 is enough, so let's do 1. And there we go. It's looking fantastic. So with this done, let's reload our application. Let's make sure that nothing is broken. And once this is done, let's just change some of the stuff. So I'll increase the height to 73. Let's change the weight to be 77. And as you can see, when we change the weight, the age is also changing. So what's the reason for that? Let me see. I'll come to my age input. And there's the issue. The initial value is still set to weight. So we are going to set the initial value to age, to Command Save. So now when we update the age, it updates the age. When we update the weight, it updates the weight. I click calculate, it calculates the BMI for us. So with that, that's pretty much it for today's tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel so that you get notified every time I release a new video. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.